All right, man. We saw what happened on Saturday. I'm still wrapping my arms around it. I got a call right after the game from a friend who said, "Have you ever seen anything like it?" I said, "Yeah, 2013, 97, 93, 95, Bama punt in 72, 82. How many games do you want me to tell you I've seen something like it where Auburn snatches victory from the jaws of defeat, or maybe it's Alabama snatching defeat from the jaws of victory?" Hey, give them credit, man. That's what makes a rivalry, and they find ways to win games in this rivalry. Quite frankly, they have no business winning, and I'll go ahead and put that in Saturday's game in that category. I thought Alabama physically dominated the football game, Travis. You may have a different take, but I thought their offensive line manhandled that defensive front until the fourth quarter, when finally 3 and 5 made a couple of plays. I thought Gary Danielson was gonna have a party there because he was waiting for Derek Brown to make a tackle the entire game, and then he made a couple. I thought the offensive line handled it. I thought Alabama moved the ball all day long. Defensively, they gave up some plays, but not to the extent that Auburn did. But the mistakes, Travis, 2 pick sixes, 13 penalties, 12 men on the field there at the end. Auburn, Malzahn manipulating the officials to get basically a free timeout at the end of the first half. It was just too much to overcome. And Auburn won a game again against Alabama when I don't think they had the better football team.
No, I think you could say in Gus Malzahn's 3 wins over Alabama as head coach at Auburn, he hasn't had the better football roster, top to bottom. Now, the 17 game, you obviously still had some guys out on the defensive side of the ball for Alabama going down to the Plains, but still top to bottom. I would say even what Alabama took to Jordan-Hare Stadium 2 years ago was a better collection of talent than what Auburn had on the field that day. There were some heroic performances for Auburn in 2017, Kerryon Johnson most notably, to the extent that he was injured late in that game, and that was pretty much it for Auburn. You lose the SEC championship game to Georgia without Kerryon Johnson, essentially, and then you lose the bowl game to UCF, which triggered a stretch of pain that the rest of us had to endure for the better part of about a year and a half there. No, I'm with you. I give Auburn a lot of credit because Alabama time and time again put itself in a position to lose the game. Auburn capitalized on those mistakes. I give Alabama a lot of credit. I give Mac Jones a lot of credit.
Sure.
Jalen Waddle. If you wondered if some of these guys beyond the so-called stars of this team had the mettle to keep coming back and give Alabama every opportunity late in the game to go ahead and get the job done, you had that answered because I thought Mac Jones showed you he has the stuff. Jalen Waddle, to me, was over 4 quarters the best player on the field.
No
You're
doubt.
Right. Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson made some plays, but some of that with Derek Brown came when he stopped really trying to take on blocks. It wasn't Derek Brown making plays because he was just the biggest, baddest dude on the field. You started seeing him use that incredible athleticism that he possesses at 320 pounds to sort of slip gaps and do some things. But as far as just straight up taking on the interior of Alabama's offensive line, Alabama was just fine there from guard to guard with Derek Brown. So, yeah, I mean, I talked about this yesterday. The mortality rate, for teams that give up not 1 but 2 non-offensive touchdowns, I wouldn't think they don't live very long to tell the tale of how that went down usually. And, Alabama was able to overcome one of those with the Waddle kickoff return, but from start to finish, just too many mistakes. You had a holding penalty on the opening drive that negates a touchdown.
Was that a holding penalty?
Yeah,
really? Okay.
Well, that's where the subjectivity of the officiating in general, not just that crew on Saturday, where it changes not just from crew to crew or game to game, Gary, but literally from play to play, within the same crew. It's such a subjective thing, officiating. So, you could certainly argue that there's been more egregious grabs than what Alex Leatherwood had there on that touchdown catch that wasn't by Henry Ruggs. But, it goes down as a hold. It takes 7 points off the board. The false starts in the fourth quarter. Joseph Bulovas, obviously, from very makeable range, hits yet another upright. It was all 3 phases, I thought. And I don't, we can talk about the offense and Bulovas, but, Auburn ran base plays on offense. I went on about this yesterday, probably to the point of ad nauseum on my show, but Auburn ran base Gus Malzahn 101 plays, inside zone, outside zone, quarterback zone read keep. And in the second half, when Alabama really needed to set the tone on some possessions for Auburn, those plays went for 15 yards or more to start drives there. And so, the defense still, in the second half of the 12th game of the regular season, understanding DJ Dale didn't play, okay. But this wasn't tricky Gus, with double reverse throwbacks and things like this, where youth really gets exposed. These were base plays, and they're spit and runs for 15, 17, 36 yards. And, Sean Shivers, he scores on an outside zone that, he's fresh legs, comes in. That's a good move by Gus and that offensive staff. That's a guy who overlooked a year ago here in Tuscaloosa. I think he went 75. We talk about holding calls. He went 75 here in Tuscaloosa last year, and Auburn lost that to a holding call. So tit for tat, I guess. But no, start to finish, Alabama physically, as you said, was good enough. But in terms of the details and taking care of those things and discipline in some instances, they were lacking.
You mentioned a couple of times some things that Auburn is able to do. I said this earlier, and this has got nothing to do with preparation. I think Alabama was prepared. I think they had a good plan. I think they had a good week of practice. But in game, I said earlier, and I'm curious if you agree, I thought the Auburn staff in game outcoached the Alabama staff. And I thought Malzahn in particular. I think the manipulation of the officials at the end of the first half was brilliant. And I think, even though I agree with Saban, I think some of these things need to be looked at, especially with that punt situation with not being allowed to get your personnel on and off the field. But still, that effectively ended the game with something that Malzahn did with putting the punter out there and leaving Nix in the game. I thought in game, Auburn and their staff and Gus Malzahn outcoached Nick Saban and the Alabama staff. You agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because you can say what you want. Gus has mastered that gray area, whether it was the 3-yard rule with the RPOs 6 years ago, with Nick Marshall and the lineman being clearly 5 or 6 yards downfield on what ended up being pretty much the deciding offensive play of that 2013 Iron Bowl, beyond obviously the kick six. And it showed up again on Saturday. And obviously, Gus and that staff have been holding that one. 4th and 4 is the perfect time. There's also the option of trying to draw Alabama offside, but you got to think in that scenario, Alabama's not going to fall for that. Alabama's like a lot of teams. They sub based on, who's on the field, who's off. So when you keep Nix out there and bring the punter on, that creates a fog, a confusion again, and it goes back to some subjectivity too from an officiating standpoint, because crew to crew, maybe you get an opportunity to counter that, like Nick was talking about after the game, but you can't count on it. And Gus gets that, and he makes it work for himself and his team.
Indeed. Speaking of the officiating, and I know you and I agree on this, it's one of the most thankless jobs that you can have. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just can't win. One of my regular callers, Tom, called in yesterday and just brutally attacked the officials and, claimed bias. I think that's where I draw the line. I don't think officials go into the game with the idea that they're going to impact the game. I don't think that doesn't happen. Nobody tries to cheat. Nobody overtly tries to have a call that changes the outcome of the game. I do wonder, though, Travis, if the Bama fatigue is even real with the officials and the criticism of officiating over the years that Alabama gets all the breaks and Alabama gets all of the close calls, which we know isn't true, but that's been and we've had teams in the league even say it happens. I wonder if that impacts officials, that when they do an Alabama game, they're thinking to themselves, I'm going to make sure that nobody thinks I favor Alabama. And you look at the number of penalties this year on the Crimson Tide, up a penalty and a half per game over any previous 12 seasons at Alabama. You look at this game with 13. You look at a lot of games where calls that were questionable went against Alabama. Do you think that's a possibility, that officials just go out of their way with the standpoint that, you know what, I just don't want to be criticized for being favorable toward Alabama, or am I just reaching there?
I think that's maybe there's some of that, but to the extent of actually carrying it out on a game-by-game basis, I think that's, pushing it a little bit. I mean, look, Alabama earned. If you go back and watch, those false starts were false starts.
Sure.
And those were just as big a killers in the grand scheme of things as maybe Alex Leatherwood held, maybe he didn't. I think officials are vulnerable for the simple fact that they're human beings. I think officials are vulnerable based on which side of the field they may be positioned at a given time. There's a reason, Gary, why on 3rd and long Saturday, Gus queued up a back shoulder fade down his sideline against Patrick Surtain.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't complete it and there's contact with Patrick Surtain, we're going nuts on that official right in front of us. And how many times do you see that call? You see it a lot, whether it's Alabama, Auburn, whoever. I think at the end of the day, I think officials are human. I think they have ears, obviously. Some would dispute whether or not they have proper vision from time to time. But no, I don't think it gets to the point of, I got to go out here today, and even if it costs Alabama the game, I got to make extra sure that I'm even more than down the middle 50-50 in regards to how I call this game. I don't think that's in play. But I think officials are influenced based on factors that go into how they're positioned and things. Absolutely, I do.
What did you think about how the end of the first half was handled from an officiating standpoint? And I've seen, former officials on television say they handled it right. Well, if they handled it right, then the rules got to be tweaked, because I think you and I both, common sense just dictates that you run a screen pass with 9 seconds to go in the middle of the field and there's 1 second left on the clock. You should not be allowed to basically be given a free timeout, run your field goal team out there, have them set up, wait for the official to get out of the way, and then snap the ball and kick a 52-yard field goal that turned out to be a deciding play in the game. So first, how did you think the officials handled it? And secondly, if that was correct, then that's got to change, right? I mean, you can't have no timeouts, run a play in the middle of the field, whether you make a first down or not, and the game continue like that?
Yeah, I talked about this yesterday too, and I didn't let Alabama's defense totally off the hook in all this either, because it was poor.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's poor that you can't make a tackle short of the sticks on basic
a giveaway play. Yeah,
you know that Gus doesn't trust his quarterback enough in that position to make legitimate throws in different areas of the field past the sticks. So what do you think's coming? Draw or screen? Something like that? Well, Auburn not only hits one screen for 14 yards, it then hits the second one for 17. So I don't let Alabama off the hook in all that either. It never should have come down to that based on time and Auburn being out of timeouts. Just somebody make a play. This is Alabama we're talking about. This isn't Ole Miss. But as far as how it was handled by the officials, I think it was handled outside of the realm of how it would usually be handled at any other time in the game, right? If it's a live ball ready for play situation, you're not afforded, you're even coming off the review, which I know caused a pseudo timeout, which certainly helped. But you got Gus Malzahn over there screaming for 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's wanted another second on top of that.
Why is he calling for 2 seconds, Gary? Because he knows he shouldn't be able to get the kickoff in a ready-for-play situation. So the situation was not administered the way it is administered at any other time in the game. Typically you'll have the umpire in there making sure everything is right, and then, as he gets out of there, the official will wind the clock, and, the snapper, with what the snapper has to do to snap the football on a field goal or a punt, it takes a second for that player to get things the way it needs to be, they don't just grab the football and one hand it back there on field goal snap. So it wasn't administered within the realm of how it would be on any other situation like that. And so, I heard Gene Scatatory, the CBS official analyst, I guess, say, well, the bottom line is we're going to run a play in that situation. Well, no, why? Why are you going to run a play? It's not a dead ball. The clock does not start on the snap. So, yeah, I mean, what you're saying is you're going outside how you typically administer that situation, and just based on what you're going to do, what you want to do, that's what you're going to do in that situation. So, yeah, look, in a way, it's probably a good thing. It's not, and give Anders Carlson credit too. The guy, it wasn't a 27-yarder. The guy still had to make it from 52, and he was huge in the game. But this wasn't Arkansas, Missouri on Friday that this happened in. So I would think, based on the magnitude and the size of the stage and all those things, that we see it addressed in some form or fashion, where there is a minimum of at least 2 seconds in a ready for play situation that a kick at an end of a quarter or, in that situation can be actually attempted.
All right. We're getting short on time and you got your own show, but I am curious to what you think about Auburn continually allowing their fans onto the field. I said a couple years ago that, there was almost an incident down there with Tony Brown. They get fined $250,000. They don't care. And, I understand it's a rivalry. I understand you've won some dramatic games, but I just think it's bad sportsmanship at this point. And in my opinion, Travis, you probably disagree with me. I mean, you've got a daughter that plays basketball. I'm sure if you're watching her play and she hits a shot at the buzzer, you're going to want to run on the court. I don't think fans have any business on the court. I don't think they have any business on the field, any business on the ice, period. In this day and age, with all the security measures that are in place, and then you're going to let 85,000 people storm the field, I don't understand why they continue to allow it to happen. And I think at some point there is going to be an incident. What's your take on that?
No, I agree. I actually agree with you. I don't think there's any situation where the fans should be on the field. I'll go this step farther with Auburn too. How about clearing out your sideline access a little bit?
Oh, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's like it's a state semifinal game at Hillcrest or something with all the people on the sideline.
Crazy.
We already had the young lady from Georgia, concussed, and could have been a lot worse. The shot she took, and she's down there in a legitimate capacity. Okay. But how about thinning out the sidelines? And I'm all for access, by the way. I'm an access guy, but to the extent where you're about 3 deep from goal line to goal, from inline to inline and across the end zones. I mean, that's amazing to me in terms of who's actually credentialed to be on the field. But as far as post game and things like that, no, I mean, you're asking for it. You're asking for it. And what you're basically saying and just paying fines is that, okay, at some point, someone is really going to get hurt. And by the way, we're going to start selling alcohol in stadiums everywhere. It's going to be everywhere in the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to really make it a point to keep people off the field. How do you think that's going to mix in time? Once you up that ante even more, it's going to lead to a really bad situation. And, that $250,000 fine is going to seem even less than it apparently already does to Auburn.
I agree. And they can keep them off the field if they want to. The bottom line is,
well, they managed to keep Georgia fans off the field that one year, didn't they? When they turned the sprinkler, the hoses on.
Absolutely. And they can keep their own player fans off the field. All you have to do is, first of all, announce during the game that you're not going to allow it, put your security around it, and you're right on the sideline access too. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's there's people everywhere. And
I don't know who all these people are. I mean, I know who Bo Jackson is. He's always down there for the Iron Bowls. I get that, but it's amazing. I don't know if they sell access or what they're doing.
Well,
but it's
I think,
crazy.
listen, maybe they don't call it selling access, but I got a feeling if you
donate at a right level,
the clout, you get on the sideline for the Iron Bowl. All right, what's coming up on Southern Fried Sports?
Well, we'll talk with Cecil Hurd of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com. A lot of fallout from the college football weekend as well. Maybe some coaching carousel talk. And maybe a little bit of recruiting as well, as it's definitely that time of year now for this Alabama staff.
It is. Thanks, Trav.
Thanks, man.